So here's your review. And after you finish this review, guess what you get to do? You can go out and celebrate if you want. Or just go to the kitchen and get a glass of water. Me, I'm going to celebrate by going to bed because it's 12:50 a.m. And I was up way too late last night, so I got to get some sleep. All right, so here's the review. We've learned some awesome stuff again in this section. And one of the most important things you want to remember is that we're looking at a couple of steps here in building web pages correctly. And so we got to know the tools to use. And the first step in this process is understanding those tools more thoroughly. What tools are available? What different building blocks do we have to create our web pages? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use semantic HTML tags as much as possible to create structure in our document, right? To break our document up, the content of our document, into different sections. And then the next thing we're going to work on is the outline. And then after that, we're going to work on the layout. So we're going to break our document up into sections, and I called this sections right here. And then we're going to create the outline, and then we're going to do the layout, lay it all out. So that's what we looked at here, is using HTML semantic HTML as much as possible to create sections. And we saw some images, right? Some pictures, these pictures here, about examples of how to use semantic HTML to break your document content up into different little areas, right? Different categories, different sections. So the semantic HTML elements that we saw were the header, the nav, main, article, section, aside, footer, H1, H6, figure, and fig caption. Right? You know, basically these ones in this image here. And we also saw how to read the documentation. So we got some orientation to reading documentation. So some really good stuff to know. We saw the difference between a section and an article. And I know this is review, but this is the review section, and it helps reinforce all this. So what is the difference between an article and a section? What's the difference? Pause the video right now. Pause it and answer it. What's the difference between an article and a section? So an article can stand on its own, right? And then a section is just going to be a group of thematically related content. And so here, section, thematic grouping of content, and article, self-contained, can stand on its own. So these are the highlights of the different elements we learned about. The header element is a group of introductory or navigational aids. It may contain some heading elements, but also other elements like a logo. The nav is a section of navigation links. It's intended for major blocks of navigation. And not all links within a document must be inside a nav element. And you could have several nav elements on a document. And then main is for the main content of the body of a document. Let me just make this bigger for you. There we go. Main is the main content of the body of a document or application. And should be unique to the document. Article, self-contained, stands on its own. Examples: a forum post, magazine or newspaper article, blog entry, object, other independent item of content. Typically includes a heading. Typically. So that's pretty much a strong recommendation. Make sure it has a heading. And same as section. Typically includes a heading. So article and section, I really like to think of the newspaper example, because people get confused about this when they get into web programming. And the section, different sections in the newspaper, the local, the world, business, and each section has articles. And then each article can have sections, right? The Africa article can have a section about, regional conflicts, a section about economic development. So that's sections and articles. And an article can stand on its own. Then we have an aside, and it's content that's related to something, right? Could be like a sidebar or an insert or an advertisement or the biography of the author or related links on the blog. And then we have a footer. And a footer is a footer for a section. Examples could include information about the author of the section. That's pretty interesting to me. Copyright data, links to related documents. And then we have H1 through H6. And those are the headings and structure content on a page by topic and importance. And so H1 is the higher importance, H6 lower importance. And this really kind of tells search engines information about our information. And then we have figure and fig captions, right? Pretty self-explanatory. We also saw the Chrome plugin, the HTML5 Outliner Chrome plugin, and how that's going to help us. And then we learned some terminology. So we learned about the document, we use the phrase document to talk about a web page. We learned about the document object model. It's just a model of the objects on the document. And we learned elements versus tags, clarified that, and div soup and div itis, and structure versus layout. And we learned about document flow, so how the different block level and inline level elements are displayed on the page, how they stack up, kind of like in Tetris. And we also saw how to use semantic HTML. So we had those example images up here, right, like all these example images. And then we also, in addition to those example images, we took like in New York Times and CNN and Reddit, and we kind of sketched out what content would go where. So this is a really valuable section. And in gaining familiarity with these different elements, these different tags, and how they work is super important. Otherwise, you're just going to be like confused and using the wrong ones in the wrong place. And then that's going to, decrease the effectiveness of your site in a variety of ways. So, excuse me. So this was some really important stuff, and it was time well spent. And make sure you review this material as you're building sites, just so that you're using the right element in the right place. And as much as possible, try to use semantic tags and take the time to figure out which one goes where, and look through that element list to see what is available, because there's more in there than the ones that are listed, but these are the main ones. All right, so that's a really good job. That's another section under our belt. And if we look at our outline here, just sort of step back and see the forest for the trees. We did our getting started, and then we had configuring your environment, where we looked at editors and how to use the terminal on GitHub. And then we had an introduction to HTML and an introduction to CSS, and then we had how to structure our documents. Next, we're going to look at document outline, and then after that, we'll look at layout essentials. So we're you're gaining a really strong foundation in learning how to build web pages correctly.